The title is quite provoking and might seem a bit strange, especially since it comes from me. However, it is for that reason, before I begin explaining why I think the hatred towards AI is misplaced, I need to give some context. The hatred towards AI is very specific in its nature, so let us have very specific definitions for it. We're talking about generative AI, such as large language models, and much more commonly, image, video, or audio generating AI. Examples are Sora, Stable Diffusion, Nano Banana by Google, Gemini, so on and so forth. And this includes multimodal AI models capable of doing all of these things at once. AI models that do other things, such as protein folding, or things such as AI-based navigation for NPCs in video games, completely unrelated. It's important to be very specific in defining the problems because AI is a very broad umbrella term. If someone rejects the premise of any AI model simply because it has the title of AI, I'm not going to take that person's arguments seriously because it's irrational and doesn't make any sense. A large portion of the people that dislike AI are artists and also creators, whether it's painters, graphics designers, programmers, music producers, digital artists, so on and so forth. I myself am a creator, so socioeconomic effects of AI aside, there's also some philosophical arguments against AI regarding artistry in general, but I'm gonna have that conversation later on. With all that context given, why the title? I think that the biggest set of worries and arguments against AI is indeed the fact that these tools can have implications that will cause a lot of loss of jobs. In other words, a set of socioeconomic effects. Whether it's programming or artistry, these jobs could in theory be replaced with AI agents. Furthermore, artists specifically, it isn't only their livelihood that is threatened by AI models. Being able to generate artworks with AI this quickly can cause a lot of alienation. There might be a flood of AI-generated artworks, and it might make it very hard to find any meaning in creating these artworks yourself, manually. Theoretically, if an artist, or anyone for that matter, didn't need to worry about the socioeconomic implications of AI, they would be able to do their thing, maintain their community, and not really worry about it. If being replaced wasn't seen as an issue, AIs would be able to be purely seen and viewed as a tool, a useful tool. Phrased slightly more concisely, the problems of AI isn't necessarily the technology itself. It is the context in which it exists in. It highlights problems that already exist in the world. It doesn't create the problems. Less jobs, more automation, with no increased compensation and salary, things such as food and shelter becoming more expensive. It's simply not sustainable. Everyone has a bias, of course, but this isn't my bias showing itself. This is simply observing the world, observing reality. I think anyone can do this. So with all that said, let us define the problems in more detail. And let me also discuss potential ideas that frame themselves as solutions to the problems. This video has chapters, but I recommend seeing it all since there is a common thread between them. There exists many problems that people have written and spoken about in regards to generative AI models. Artists finding that these companies have stolen their work in order to train the generative AI models without their permission and with no compensation. Jobs such as programming, visual art such as graphic design, 3D or 2D artworks, music production, customer service, editing, writing, content creation, so on and so forth, being replaced by AI models. There's fear that these AI models will eventually grow in their capabilities to a point where they can produce and perform any task better than any human could. In other words, surpassing us in every way, and eventually perhaps rendering us inferior. It may sound eccentric, but this is a fear many people do actually have. Where it comes from, I am also going to talk about in depth later. Alienation. If artists find themselves needing to use AI in order to compete in the market, they may use AI to edit, to create visual art, to produce music, so on and so forth, all in order to not be replaced and keep their jobs. They might find themselves even further alienated from the works and from their artistry, even more than what the previous art industry has caused. This level of alienation might have various of other compounding effects, both mental and physical. example. Of course, alienation isn't new with the Industrial Revolution, but it might reach a peak. So in essence, there's a fear of a reduction of jobs in the market. Not really something that hasn't happened before as a result of technological advancements even. Maybe we can adapt to this as a society. And then there's the fear of the disconnection of the humanity of performing certain tasks, such as creating artworks. Even with basic things such as thinking, what if people start using AI to think in place of themselves? Maybe for life decisions, maybe for education, maybe for medical reasons, artwork, programming, so on and so forth. People might use AI in place of their own brains. A large portion of these problems aren't new, and they've kind of always been here as a result of the Industrial Revolution. However, with these technological advancements, they may yet worsen. In fact, they might even reach their peak, the epitome. Some of the problems are philosophical, but a good amount of them do have socioeconomic roots, such as these. So let me discuss those in detail first, since they might have more logical potential solutions. With the increase of automation, less human work is required to sustain society, with no reduction to the work week. This contrast is not sustainable. No decrease in cost for essential products or shelter, and no increase in salary. Well, even before AI, this was an issue. To me, at least, it is quite obvious that modern-day economic systems simply aren't fit for the modern world. I think they're outdated and they cause a lot of problems. Once again, everyone has a bias, but this is simply an observation anyone can make at this point. There are problems. So, could you create new economic systems that not only improve society as a whole, but as a result, renders AI a very useful tool? I think that changing economic systems in the world or specific locations has to be done experimentally, in smaller pockets. And there probably has to be large case studies in order to find something that works. This isn't something that you can do this quickly. It doesn't work like that. In order to do this at all, you would need a lot of investments, a lot of competence, a lot of effort, and very little corruption, because of course, people will try to abuse the systems in various ways in order to gain an advantage. One must make sure that these new systems are safe from malicious actors before they are written into law. If you succeed, maybe a country could implement them, or a union could implement them. However, this kind of thing, of course, requires broad cooperation between companies and governments, not something that's realistic. This experimental and scientific method of handling internal affairs and external affairs, I think it's very unlikely for most countries. It's also not really a process that you can rally people behind, because science intrinsically takes a lot of time, effort, and it's quite uninteresting to look at. There's very little egoism behind it, which makes it very uninteresting to the masses. Maybe countries that utilize direct democracy or are very multi-party have a higher chance of doing something along these lines, creating new ideas and implementing them, write them into law, and hopefully they could be a boon for society in regards or without regards to AI in general. But given the track record of most governments and the trajectory most governments are currently heading in, I don't see this as a likely solution. There's too little education around the topic of AI and economy in general. Furthermore, there's a lot of greed in the world. I think there is not enough regulation around these things that are made in a proper manner. All these things combined, I think, creates a scenario where people don't really know how or what to vote for, if there even is anything to vote for that could prove itself beneficial to this topic. Observing a problem in the world, trying to provide an ethical, scientific solution to it, creating a movement for it, having enough people to read about it and vote for the problems, for the solutions to the problems, or having a party actually try to implement this methodology of solving the problems. It's simply not how the world works. It's a fever dream. Instead, you need to formulate a political answer to the problem. I suck at that. I'm not even gonna try to do it. Luckily, it would seem as all politicians also suck at that, ironically. So once again, I don't think this entire theoretical solution is likely. If you disagree, I would like you to explain why. To be concise, I haven't really spoken about theoretical and, in my view, unlikely ideas of economic solutions that could act as solutions. But there are a few ideas floating around, and I will briefly show them here. Instead of the AI job crisis solution being provided by a government, could a company or an organization actually provide the solutions to this problem? Or are they more likely to provide solutions to these problems? I think that the answer is potentially, but once again, there's a few pitfalls. Most of the problems I've described with government solutions and switching economic systems kind of also are in effect for companies. The only difference between a large company and a government, in essence, is the monopoly on force. Let us not forget that a lot of the lobbying that happens, that influence the governments, is indeed created and done by the companies themselves. One could kind of view them as a unit. Ideally, a government would serve its people. Practically, greed, corruption, lobbying, and oligarchy tends to seep in and ruin things. And the company ideally would serve its customers in order to financially benefit, but practically they end up growing large enough, providing services that people rely on with no other alternatives. Competition quickly gets either swallowed up, or they collude in order to maintain their current power structure, trying to maximize profits at the expense of not only the consumers, but also the employees. The idea of governments or companies solving the problems that I've set forth, they exist, of course they do, but we've seen that it's simply not something that's possible. It doesn't happen on its own, and in a way it's entropy. If you leave them be on their own, things just get worse. The third solution that I would like to propose is a bit difficult for me to phrase in a concise way, so bear with me for a second. People naturally evolve in an optimistic way that eventually acts as a solution to the problem. It is because of the fact that this isn't really a utopian idea, it's how things have almost always gone in the world, that I think it is the most likely solution. Whether it's alienation, loss of jobs, or massive economic bubbles that eventually burst and cause various terrible effects in the world, it is the idea that people in a decentralized manner will be able to create solutions to the problems. For instance, this entire outrage against AI, where artists would protest against AI usage and training, where people would poison data sets by using various tools. These are decentralized ways of protesting, and it is a potential solution. These kinds of movements is exactly what I'm talking about in this chapter. These methods, they do work, and by collectively organizing people in order to perform these large acts, you can incentivize companies or governments to act differently. You can allow them to shift their focus. Furthermore, in terms of artists not being able to find anyone to commission or finding a much smaller market for their work, I do believe that the smaller subset of people that care about art that is specifically created by people is big enough that it can sustain itself economically. Certain people do only care about human-made artworks, and I think this group of people is big enough to be able to sustain itself. Furthermore, if they organize in such a way that companies notice, I think you will eventually start seeing companies create products specifically with the no AI label in order to attract those people. If you aren't convinced of this whole idea of decentralized solutions popping up serendipitously and randomly, let me give a few more examples. With the rise of digital photography and automatic editing, automatic white balance, so on and so forth, people find a higher meaning and a larger interest in analog photography, handmade products, music that is performed or recorded in an analog manner. Humans value the physicality of these things because it simply satisfies more of our senses, something purely digital artificial intelligence can't really do. We also value human-to-human connection. That is a biological feature. So with the rise of AI content and the saturation of AI-generated media, whether it's writing, drawings, paintings, music, or other forms of creation, I think as a result, people will find and focus on human-made content even more. It will stand out. Actually having a meetup where you share artworks that you've created of various kinds might become even more appreciated than it was before, simply because of the prevalence of AI-generated content. Being able to discuss the artworks with the creators, it has a level of depth people might appreciate more. I know I certainly do, at least. I can use myself as an example here. I simply care about the entire process of creation. There's a certain distaste that I get when discovering that the artwork wasn't created by a person with a specific intent, with effort. And I think all of these things that I've mentioned will be reflected economically. And I think that will cause companies to act in a very specific way in response to it. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. I think governments may do the same. Well, maybe not all governments, but I have faith that eventually more governments will start to act accordingly. This entire idealistic solution, it's kind of optimistic and it is obviously imperfect, but I do believe in it because it prevents me from being cynical. Cynicism won't solve or alleviate any of the problems that I've mentioned. Decentralized movements do, of course, inherently have a downside, and it is the fact that you must put in a tremendous amount of effort into them individually. You must use your voice, you must educate people, you must talk to them. It requires unity and sustained effort. It requires focus. Notice how in all of these potential solutions, whether you disagree with them or not, whether you found them hard to understand or not, I've never really spoken about the technology itself, AI models. I've never demonized the technology itself. I've never spoken about it in a bad manner because it is inanimate. It doesn't listen to you. Hating it doesn't do anything. Like I've said time and time again, I think sincerely that the problem with AI is the context in which they exist in, not the AI models themselves. And the reason I think this is a very important distinction to make, it's because the AI models themselves can have an immense impact positively on the world and on every single individual. Hating the technology itself can be unproductive. And I think it can also be quite foolish because of the immense capabilities and immense possibilities that exist. Our entire world is a result of the incredible and beautiful progress humanity has made in terms of technological advancements. And AI is a logical progression of that. There are a set of deep systemic issues, and even the methods in which the AI models are produced can be problematic. The companies and the economic situation, it does create a lot of distaste, a lot of hate. I don't deny this, but it is important to separate the technology itself, both conceptually and the actual products that we have, from the actual governments enforcing them and the companies that created them, as well as the people that use them. So while I've talked about the consequences of AI in the modern world, I haven't really talked about the technology itself. And the second part of this entire video, I am going to talk about the technology a bit more because it is important. I also think it can clear up a lot of misunderstanding, misinformation, and also disinformation regarding the technology. So let me tell you more about the technology in question. This next part is going to be a bit more technical, so I would like to tell you about a platform that, much like this video, which is educational in nature, is also an educational platform. I am, of course, talking about Brilliant. Brilliant is an educational platform that you can use to learn about many topics, such as sciences, mathematics, programming, and others, all in a granular and personalized fashion in order to maximize your own learning, helping you reach your true potential as a problem solver. You can download the application on your phone and start learning by building a habit, performing daily interactive tasks, or you can allocate longer times of study and use their web application in order to study a topic in depth with an extensive amount of learning material and courses that they offer, so you can reach your learning goals in an efficient, interactive, as well as a fun manner. So if you're interested, you may use my link or scan the QR code to start learning for free for an entire 30 days. And by using the link or the QR code, you'll also get a 20% discount on the annual subscription, which grants you full access to everything that Brilliant has to offer. All of the courses and all of the learning materials, which are very plentiful. I can personally attest to the fact that the platform is very useful for learning by providing not only more interactivity to the process, but also a broad set of subjects to choose from. There's likely something for you. So, with all that said, let me tell you a bit more about generative AI. It's not like the hatred was created out of nothingness. How do these AI models actually work? How are they trained? And what are their promises? These companies have spent, and they are spending, billions of euros in data center infrastructure, specifically for AI and AI training. They collude with each other in order to maximize investments to the industry. And they do this on an extraordinary level. These companies have caused disruptions in consumer-grade technologies, which has caused increased prices. They've caused seemingly unstable cyclical investment patterns to occur. I'm not an economist, but I will point out that this seems quite strange and unstable. These immense investments are also intermingled with the major governments economically. They've also lobbied the governments quite obviously. If a crash happens, literally everyone is going to feel the effects, no matter how far away you live, as a result of how connected the world is economically. And all that is on top of the already harsh economic situation in the world. The immense harm this can potentially cause, and has to an extent already caused, is of course one of the reasons people have the hatred towards not only the companies, but the products of the companies, AI models. I understand this. It is fine. It's logical. But I do think you need to separate the technology conceptually from the companies and the actions of them. All of this that I've mentioned is causing this hatred towards the technology, whether it's indirectly or directly. But I am not done yet. There's also the fact that an immense amount of electricity is being spent on running these data centers and training the AI models. So much energy is required that there is talks of building bespoke fission reactors to power the data centers. So with all these investments, all of this lobbying, you have to ask the question, what is it for? What is the ultimate goal? Does really anything warrant all of this risk? Well, I have an answer to that question, and it is the answer the companies give. It is this idea of exponential growth. It's the idea of AGI, artificial general intelligence. That's their ideal result, and it is essentially an AI model so advanced that it can perform almost any task better than humans can. It might even be more conscious than humans, whatever that means, in essence rendering us obsolete. That is kind of the fear-mongering that they've been spreading, but it is also something that you do want to consider with these technologies. After all, I think you can definitely think about representing AI models as neural networks that function mathematically, at least in a way similar to our brain. We can model the brain in a neural network digitally. Bit of caveats to that, but I will speak about those later. Part of the problem I mentioned earlier, where people have a fear that we might create an AI model that replaces us, that renders us obsolete, that fear, in a way, it is AGI. It is the goal they're trying to reach. But consequences of AGI aside, are they really on track to reaching that goal? The answer is maybe. It's hard for me to know what these companies study in secret. Nobody knows except for the people that work within it. However, there hasn't really been any gossip around such incredible advancements in the technology. In fact, I would probably wager if some breakthrough happened, we would know about it. I can't continue talking about this topic before actually explaining how the current generation of AI models work and how a model that has reached the status of AGI would work. The transformer architecture is a type of architecture for artificial intelligence that is very good at natural language processing. Furthermore, it has a capability to understand context, which is something important if you want to understand language. It takes an input that can be any form of data, and it can predict the output that is most likely, given the data set that it has been trained on, given the parameters the AI model is currently running on. In essence, it is a function. It's a black box that takes in an input, analyzes it, and processes it with the parameters that the AI model is running on, and it provides an output. It doesn't really work in a procedural way similar to our brains. It is more akin to a mathematical function. So the core training data set is the key here. It is why many artists feel cheated, because companies obviously use data indiscriminately to create this data set. You can philosophically talk about if this is actually legal or not, but again, that's not really the point of this entire discussion. Multimodal refers to the capability the AI might have to analyze and produce different forms of data. For instance, not just text, but also images, maybe video, which really is images, or sound. This transformer architecture is what essentially all AI models that are currently in use. It's the state of the art currently. ChatGPT, Gemini, Sora, Stable Diffusion, all of them use something based on the transformer architecture. architecture. Image-generating AIs, such as Sora, which create videos, or Stable Diffusion, use a diffusion transformer. It is slightly different. These AI models are the current state of the art. It's the top of the line that we currently have access to and know about publicly. It is the fruits that all of these companies have produced given the immense investments, given the economic conditions they've created in the world. So are transformer architecture, multimodal, artificial intelligence models, are they the right approach to eventually reach the goal of AGI? I don't think so. I genuinely don't think so. We would probably need a completely new architecture in order to create something that intelligent. I think that these AI models have been trained on an immense amount of information with an immense amount of energy and infrastructure. That said, I don't think they have shown any ability to reason or create anything outside of that data set, outside of what is already known. I don't think they've shown any ability to evolve. I don't think they've really shown anything that even comes close to the complexities of what we would call consciousness or life. We don't understand those subjects, but we can understand how the current AI models work. We can understand how to train them, and yet we don't really understand how our own mind works. Meddle with the parameters of the AI model, even slightly, and it's gonna produce nonsense. It will start hallucinating. It becomes obvious that it's not reflecting on its own productions or its own words. It is simply predicting. And as I will briefly list, there's also a lot of other problems that these models have that shows that they are very useful and they're very good, but they do have pitfalls. And I think these are quite architectural. And I'm not saying that these problems can't be solved. I still think the models can become a lot more intelligent and a lot better, but I don't think they will ever reach AGI, at least not with the current architecture. It simply isn't consistent with the definition of AGI. So I think a lot of it is fear-mongering created by the companies in order to create a sensation of them being the authority in the field. You should invest in them because you can trust them. I don't think that's correct. So is it worth it? All of the investments, all of the supply line disruptions, all of the potential side effects and consequences these AI models might have, not only in the world, but also to the human psyche. What happens if people start using AI models to think in place of themselves? How will that diminish our own cognition? Is it worth it? It's an open-ended question. I personally don't think so. I think it's too much. I think it's too risky. I don't think it will benefit people as much as the investments should benefit people. Furthermore, I also think it is a very good business move to create fear-mongering regarding AGI, to create these predictions of extremely intelligent AI models that will replace people. But that is my personal belief, and it is conjecture, because I cannot know what the companies have worked on behind closed doors. So you may form your own opinions, of course, given the information that is public. So to conclude, they say one thing, AGI, that is the goal, yet they produce products that are very far from it, and it is to an extent that is quite massive. The technologies are impressive, they can be very useful, but is it worth risking potential economic disaster for that kind of technology at the expense of the majority of people if something goes awry? I don't think so. And yet the investments continue, the supply line disruptions continue, no one can stop it. So in essence, it is important to know what's causing it and perhaps avoid it in the future. And with all of this in mind, of course, it is no wonder that people hate the technology. It is, after all, the product, and I must say that it is definitely sad. However, I will separate all of the problems in the world, how the companies handle this concept, and the actual technology and its promises itself. I have realized, anecdotally, that people tend to use AI models not to learn or to educate themselves, or to sift through data, for instance, but instead they use them to completely use the model to think in place of themselves, to replace their own mind. And you need to ask the question, what are the consequences of this? Or what if certain pockets in the population start worsening their own cognition because they've stopped thinking properly on their own? These things are problems, but they're very theoretical. I haven't found any double-blind studies yet that try to actually answer these questions in a scientific manner. There's a few, I will cite them, but again, it's mostly very theoretical. Still, I think this is a problem that you need to consider. My point is that so-called improper AI usage might have adverse effects that aren't really considered in the world today. And I don't think any government has tried to fix this potential problem or tried to research them. And I don't think the companies do so either. So I think you need to, as a society, start placing more emphasis on proper AI usage. I genuinely think that it's important, and something that is overlooked. How do you create, evolve, and preserve your own mental acuity and not have it atrophy because you've only started to use AI instead of actually thinking? It seems to be a question and a problem that everyone is responsible for, and yet no one has taken the responsibility of solving the problem. Not very good. All of that is along with the fact that you will start to not be able to trust information you find online. You cannot take things on face value anymore. There might be a lot of propaganda generated by AI models. Malicious usage of AI is also something that you need to consider now. And once again, I think it is important that governments, schools, and companies place a larger emphasis on this problem. People need to be aware of it. And it is a bit disappointing that all I can really find is a few obscure research papers that don't really have any double-blind studies on the subject, at the time of at least researching it. Up until this point, I haven't really discussed the philosophical nature of this entire subject too much. I've, to an extent, downplayed AGI and its potential ramifications of our own human consciousness potentially being inferior to that kind of invention. I've also not really mentioned much about the dataset AI companies use to create these AI models and how that may or may not be ethical. Other than alienation, I haven't really mentioned how artists might react to the saturation of the media in the form of AI content. But let's focus on one thing at a time, and I would like to begin with the entire consciousness debate. From the previous chapters, I hope that I managed to convey that I believe the whole AGI thing is currently exaggerated. Taking into account all publicly available information and the current state-of-the-art AI models, I don't think there is a AGI floating around that has any capability of rendering us obsolete or having the chance to create substantial damage to the world. Besides, if we can create AI models that near AGI, surely we can use them to actually enhance ourselves, to be able to compete, or perhaps even merge with the AI models, so we can increase the average human intelligence to a new level. This kind of thinking is a transhumanist perspective. I believe it is the most logical approach to this problem of AGI, but that is an entire philosophy, and it's out of the scope for this entire discussion, but I would like to at least mention it, that I don't think the dangers of AGI are as prominent as people make them out to be, specifically because as we reach that point, I think we will have enough technology to improve our own selves. But I would like to continue to mention that I don't think the modern day AI models are a precursor to this kind of super intelligence. I really don't. If you compare them to the human brain, for instance, it is unlike any digital neural network that we currently have by a lot. Sort of like a neural network that is digital, our brain is an organ that contains a set of interconnected networks made up of neurons, responsible for different parts of our behavior and perception. However, our neurons aren't static, and they're not really based on a concrete architecture. They evolve and they find new connection over time through neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, while we interact with the world and learn. Furthermore, the brain doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's an entire nervous system, digestive and respiratory system, multiple senses that act as inputs, transferring the information to specific parts in our brain, and also an entire bacterial ecosystem that we do rely on and that relies on us as our hosts. All this giving us a conscious experience, not only of ourselves and our sense of self, but for the entire universe around us. So with all that in mind, I am sorry that I can't be very confident that Google or OpenAI are on track to creating something to compete. And I don't think the current state-of-the-art models that we know of live up to that. The technology is impressive, yes. It will have implications, both good and bad, yes. But I have not seen anything that strikes me as anything other than that. And yet there are people that treat this entire technology as it's the second coming of Jesus, as it's the next super intelligence, as if it's very, very close. I think that this comes from a rather intentional misunderstanding that is quite deep of what these AI models actually are. I'm not saying that an AGI kind of invention has to be similar to the human brain. I'm not saying that, but I don't think it will be similar to this very traditional transformer architecture AI model as well. At best, I think current-day AI models can reach a point where they can be used as a personal assistant that is extremely intelligent, that can help you learn things, ideally in a manner that is unbound from the cloud in a way that you can run locally, uncontrolled by companies. Since I don't think they are to be trusted, I think the more immediate threat of AI is actually people using them in a malicious way. Think propaganda, disinformation, or maybe ignorant politicians using AI models for geopolitical reasons, maybe using them to try to predict certain outcomes. When I see AI-generated content, I am entirely of the opinion that the actual artwork, and yes, I would call it artwork, actually belongs to the AI model itself. I don't think it would belong to the company. I don't think it would belong to the person that made the prompt. I think it would belong to the AI model itself. Similarly as to how if I commissioned an artist to draw a picture, I wouldn't say that it was my work of art. I commissioned it, yes. With a description, yes. However, the artist made the art. Furthermore, if the AI model was trained on such a large subset of information that is available on the internet without the permissions of people, I think the content and the model rightfully belong to everyone. I don't think companies should legally be able to have ownership of the entire model. It's one of the problems I think the current laws and the current regulations around AI have completely disregarded. Of course, it is in the interest of the companies to not have this be the case, but it is in the interest of the majority to have it be the case. Philosophically, there is a somewhat common thread in this entire discussion, and it is regarding alienation. Economic situations aside, how do people deal with the fact that maybe one day they will be able to create better artworks, better content with AI models than they could ever dream of? How do you deal with that kind of alienation? What if I would be able to simply generate this entire video instead of making it? What if you feel like your entire judgment could be more efficiently replaced by this AI model? What if consumers start to not care about AI-generated content? What if entire movies could be generated with perfect cinematography, maybe even using actual actors to specifically target someone's tastes? I can say that I wouldn't be interested in such things, but it's never possible to predict. What will be the outcome of all of these problems and potential realities? It is not something I can divine, but what you can be certain it will cause is alienation. And how do you deal with it? I think this is a problem that people will have to kind of ponder and think to solve for themselves individually. Saying no to progress and technology, I don't think it is wise, but that still does not mean that content and media created by other people will lose its meaning, even though what I've described might be the ultimate level of alienation post-industrial revolution. Personally, I think the most favored solution is to look inwards, to start creating things only for yourself. Much as even before AI, the industrialization of art has kind of diminished the meaning of it in order to become mass marketable, I think we will likely head to the opposite direction with the prevalence of AI models and AI-generated content. Furthermore, I think people will start to appreciate things that are more physical and things that are more personal, created by other people. I do think that this looking inwards is the solution to the alienation problem, at least to me. There's of course also the transhumanist perspective of evolving your own perception and your own capabilities technologically to an extent where you can actually compete and create things at the same level of the AI models at the same efficiency. That might happen. Would that reduce alienation or produce more of it? I don't know. Maybe there will always be a balance between creating things that you find a meaning in, that you can express yourself with, and AI models. Or maybe there is no balance. It's impossible for me to know. Unfortunately, I am not an oracle of truth. I cannot know what the answer is to these questions. They are very philosophical in nature. Some people don't care about alienation and only care about the financial incentives of creating things. I'm not that person. So I must suffer through the questions as every other artist would. Yourself and I and many others simply must ponder these questions and hope to find a solution to them that are personal, that work for us. It's how things are, it's the way it is, and it is what it is. But I do remain optimistic. I do think that people will actually prefer and eventually stick to things that are made without AI, because I think that the human connection portion of all of it still remains very important to us, because we are biologically wired to favor those kinds of things. To some people, the immediate dopamine hits of attention and improved and increased finances, I don't think that is what everyone cares about. I know I certainly don't. Anyhow, if it's any consolation, this entire problem with alienation, it's nothing anyone will ever face alone. It's something that everyone will deal with. It's something that people have already dealt with in regards with the Industrial Revolution, and also in regards to the industrialization of artwork, such as music or other things. We've been dealing with it, and I think we will continue to deal with it. I don't think it is a problem that will remain as long as you remain open-minded. A mixture of technical topics, philosophical topics, sometimes political topics, problems and potential solutions, all of which are of course biased with my own perception. It's important to state that. It's impossible to have an entirely objective view on these things other than, well, what can be objective. For instance, the effects AI would have on human cognition. But I've attempted to be as grounded in common reality as I possibly can. Hopefully it's been worth it. These are topics you could speak about for hours and write about extensively, but I wanted to collect my thoughts and put them forward in a concise manner, because I think it's important that one does speak about this subject, especially if you do things such as this, create things. I don't expect all of the meaning that I've tried to portray to be transferred perfectly. I think people might misunderstand some of the statements I've made, but that's fine. You cannot perfectly understand someone, so it is what it is. Regardless, I do think that the AI hatred is misplaced, and I think I've explained why I think that's the case. And I do not think AI will spend the end of artwork and people creating things, both financially as well as purely for creative purposes and expression. If you disagree with me on certain topics, on certain statements, do let me know. I am very interested, as long as it's in good faith and you have actually a grounded argument for it, and not just complete nonsense. I would rather not engage in such discussions. Besides, it's not really a subject where anyone can be right or wrong. It is very, very subjective. Anyhow,